Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm looking at two of my favorite guitars. On one hand, we have the Epiphone 1959 Les Paul Standard, what I would consider one of the best guitars Epiphone has ever made, versus the PRS SE McCarty. Brand new guitar, and I think one of the best PRS SEs made. Now these guitars retail for within $50 from one another, so very comparable in price, and in a strange twist of fate, well, the design was overseen by the same person. And who was that? Well, let's find out. All right, so here's a very brief history between Les Paul and Ted McCarty, the two guitars we're looking at today. Now, obviously Les Paul was an incredible human being. He was an amazing player and performer, he was a total gearhead and modder, and he was an inventor, all kind of put together into this amazing guy. Now in the early days, he was kind of more affiliated with Epiphone. He would go into the factory after hours where he could just experiment with all their gear and wood and tools, and that's where he first made the log, which was basically just a plank of wood with pickups on it, and he was experimenting with the kind of tones you could get out of a solid piece of wood versus obviously the big body jazz guitars of the era. Now, eventually he gets headhunted by Gibson, so Les Paul comes over to the Gibson camp from Epiphone and he starts working with Gibson. Now, who's the president of Gibson at the time? From 1950 to 1966? Well, a certain Ted McCarty. Now, under McCarty, the development of the Les Paul happens, the Flying V, Firebird, the SG, the humbucking pickup, the two-pneumatic bridge, probably some other stuff, but all the things we kind of take for granted nowadays was oversawn by Ted McCarty. Now fast forward to 1985, the mid-80s, when Paul Reed Smith is starting up his guitar company. Well, he's looking through old patents and he notices a certain name on like almost all the good ones. Certain Ted McCarty. So there you go. He strikes up a relationship with Ted, and to honor Ted, he makes the McCarty model. So that's how these two guitars came to be. It's kind of a long, convoluted thing of relationships, and like all things in life, relationship means a lot. So you got, Les Paul with Gibson, and then eventually Ted McCarty or Gibson with Paul Reed Smith. So there's all kind of interconnected, but one man kind of like, has his fingerprints on both guitars. So it makes it for some really interesting reading. But let's get into it and look at these guitars because they're very comparable in terms of specs and prices. And of course, we're going to look at feature versus feature and tone versus tone. All right, so let's kick things off with the Epiphone 1959 Les Paul Standard. And as I said off the top, I think this is the best guitar, in my experience, that Epiphone has ever put out from their Les Paul line. And there's a simple reason for that, and that's because when I pick up a Les Paul, it's not to play it like an Ibanez, or it's not to play it like a Strat. I want that vintage, like take me back to the 50s kind of experience. And that's why I think the 1959 is one of the best at doing that, because it's essentially a Gibson R9, but it's the Epiphone R9, right? So it saves you a ton of money because the R9s are ridiculously expensive, and you don't have to worry, about taking it places and playing it, actually playing the guitar or whatever. So it's not just a collector piece, but it's, definitely harkens back to the early 1959 days. So I'll link to it down in the video description for full specs and that kind of stuff. But here is what I love about the guitar. Gibson Burstbucker pickups, CTS pots, Switchcraft switch. So the electronics are premium. So you don't feel like you have to, update it. And everything else, like the neck profile and the long tenon and everything, like they did a really good job making this like the original, but the price is so much better. Now, what don't I like about it? Well, I think probably cosmetically, it's the satin finishes. Maybe just like they tried to make it really vintagey, but it just kind of, I don't know, it's maybe not my favorite. And that's nitpicking because playing the guitar and listening to it and the construction and everything is beautiful. So that's my one gripe, is like the satin finish doesn't really come off looking too vintagey. Like, I don't know. Maybe they should have just worn it off in certain spots, like maybe made it shinier where you don't touch it and faded where you do touch it, that kind of thing. But other than that, small gripe, amazing guitar. Right, now on to the PRS SE McCarty. Obviously this is the single cut version, and as you can see, it is the SE version. So really thrilled to have this option because previously, just like the Gibson R9, the core model McCarty, unaffordable to like 99.9% of the population. Those guitars are just so expensive. So I'm absolutely thrilled for like players who can have the option between like the Epiphone 1959 versus, you know, this guitar right here, which is the SE McCarty. So love that option. Now, what are the main differences between these guitars? So let's just talk a little bit like feature versus feature. So on the Epiphone, you get a beautiful vintage hardshell case. So it's kind of aged on the outside. You open it up and it's got like all the pink felt in it and stuff. It's an awesome case for a guitar in that price tier. So that's definitely one for the Epiphone. Here we do get a gig bag, and the PRS SE gig bags are quite nice. Doesn't compare to the hardshell case. So if that matters to you or not, that is one big difference. On the PRS here, you do get coil splits. So you can split each pickup separately, go into like a single coil mode, mix and match them, you know, have one humbucker, one single, just much more versatile on this guitar versus the Epiphone, which is just old school kind of, you know, Les Paul tones. A little bit lighter on this guitar and a little bit more ergonomic. That's, you know, something that people should be aware of. You do get the belly scoop right there, and of course the Epiphone classic upper horn scoop for, you know, access way up here. So that is a difference as well. But in terms of like overall construction, beautiful on both guitars. You know, playability, excellent on both guitars. So that's why I say these two kind of represent, in my mind at least, some of the best the company has to offer. Now, any potential downsides? Well, I would say probably the tuning machines. Buttons are plastic. So when you go to tune, it kind of reminds you that you're not playing like a super premium guitar. So that would say, you know, it's not essential, but it is something kind of like the finish on the Epiphone that kind of takes a little bit away from the premium feel. Now, for people who want more detailed specs, the weight, the price, the availability, all that kind of stuff, I will link to both guitars down in the video description below. But now let's do a little A-B comparison, tone versus tone. Well, let me know in the comments section below which guitar you guys thought sounded best in the head-to-head A-B comparison. Now, here are my final thoughts on these two guitars. If you want a guitar that's going to make you forget you ever wanted a Gibson R9. Well, this fits the bill. Absolutely. It's got, you know, a little bit of the heft to it. It's got a chunkier neck. You know, you want to play some big slow bends. You want to play some jazz chords. You want to go to the bridge and click on your overdrive pedal. This guitar takes you there. Absolutely. Beautiful instrument, the quintessential vintage 50s Les Paul experience. Absolutely, it's great. Now, if you want something a little bit more kind of refined, you know, a little bit thinner on the neck, a little bit more, like I said, refined playing experience, gorgeous design and, you know, finishes and all that kind of stuff. I didn't even talk about the hardware there. Look at that. Like only PRS can pull that off. The mixed metals there. Absolutely gorgeous, just looks and feels elite for sure. So if you want something a little bit more refined, a little bit more lightweight, you know, a little bit more easy to play on long sets and that kind of stuff, yeah, can't go wrong with the PRS SE McCarty. So yeah, Ted McCarty had his fingerprints over both of these designs, which is pretty interesting. Vintage versus slightly more refined and modern. And then other than that, it just comes down to which guitar, you know, you guys thought sounded better. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Other than that, have yourself a great week. Take care.